I'm delighted to have Lauren Du Plooy Flowers with us, who's Head of Haven for Inclusive Culture and Wellbeing. And also, I know I'm going to embarrass her, but still award-winning for this year, Outstanding Inclusion Professional in Hospitality, Travel and Leisure. So, Lauren, it's great to have you on board.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, really good. So we've got 5 questions today, which we kind of walk through, and Lauren's had those in advance to give a bit of prep. But we're going to talk through from that perspective and hear what Lauren's thinking about inclusive culture. And Lauren and I have worked with each other for a number of years, so it's great that we've built really good kind of friendship over that point in time. So shall we get stuck in, Lauren?
Let's do it.
So when organisations talk about inclusive culture, what does that look like in practice on an ordinary working day in Haven or for yourselves?
Sure. I think this is a great question, and there's a great set of questions that bring our reality at Haven to life. For me, it's very easy to look at inclusive cultures as something that, Bob down the road's doing, what's the best playbook, handbook to read off, but actually it's about identifying what's important to us as an organization, our team, and then embedding that as something that we experience every day. And we're still absolutely on this journey and learning as we go along. So by no means are we perfect. But in practice, it's about it showing up, inclusion showing up in our decision making, in the voices we hear and open up space for, who gets heard, the opportunities that are available to our team. So at Haven, we have so many different opportunities for our team to grow in our business, all the way from starting with us, say on a park, to becoming GMs. We have many stories like that, how people feel safe in terms of contributing their ideas, but also in challenging, the way that we do things. That's a really important part of being inclusive and having that inclusive culture. And it means that people really feel like they can input into who Haven is essentially and our overall culture. And I think for us, kind of taking it a step further, it's about what are the pillars that will help us to do that? And we've really identified and honed in on 4 key pillars that I've spoken about in other arenas as well. And they're about listening, which I've touched on just now, data. It's a recurring theme, certainly all the way along in my career. Capability, something I'll touch on in more detail later on in our conversation, and then also leadership, which we can often take for granted. So, when I'm talking about listening, it's about helping us to understand our people's lived experience. So here at Haven, the data, from my perspective, but also from a leadership perspective, helps us to identify patterns and barriers that might be in place. The curiosity, in terms of our leaders, our team having that curiosity to explore is really important. And we often hear that word curiosity, but I kind of prefer to lean on the word capability, and I think they both go hand in hand. You have to have curiosity, but with that you have to have the capability, the skills to embed an inclusive culture. And then leadership, you've got to have that buy-in, you've got to have that want and desire all the way to the top in the business to ensure that it is a priority and it is an important part. And when those elements work together, Stephen, that's when inclusion can stop being, an aspiration, but actually it's part of every day. And again, like I said in the beginning, it doesn't mean that we're perfect by any means, and it doesn't stop, one day we suddenly achieve an inclusive culture. It's ongoing. We're reacting to what our team looks like today, what is happening in the world, what's the feedback that we're listening to and hearing. So it's an ongoing thing. I don't think you can ever say, we are 100% inclusive right now. It's ongoing. And I think once you realize that and embed what are the pillars that are going to help you get that, then you can be on a really great track.
Yeah, and it's lovely that like the science sitting behind it as well. So I really enjoy, and I know we've spoken before about data. So data is really important, and I think it's brilliant about how you've looked at this year for Haven and what are your priorities, but data based, because you can't do everything, which we've talked about. But actually, where's the highest priorities that you can do to make people feel inclusive from that point of view? And I think it also goes back to that leadership pillar. We see so often organisations, it's the leaders got to be acting behaving, listening, and then it ripples through. Whereas when it's just we are doing inclusive culture, but the behaviours aren't there sitting behind it, you can really see a difference, can't you?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, fab. So great, very, very nicely articulated. So we've got a great start. So really good. So in your experience, what's the quietest but most powerful behaviours leaders can adopt to make people feel genuinely they belong and safe?
Yeah, and again, I think this is a great question. I like the what's the quietest but most powerful. I touched on it in the previous answer. I think I'm going to be cheeky and mention two things. So curiosity, is something that we often hear in this space, in the DE&I space, but I think it genuinely does have a really important place. So those leaders who create that sense of belonging genuinely show that they're curious, that they're interested in experiences that are different to their own. And we've seen that in many guises at Haven, where we've had leaders take part in mentoring programs through external partners, and they brought in, wow, I've heard these experiences from people who are different to me. How can that make me a better leader? And I've seen that play out incredibly impactfully across the business. They ask questions, listening carefully, and I think it's about as a leader and being curious, and not just a leader, as a team member, asking questions and not being afraid to listen. And our natural instinct is to talk, but actually if we can take a moment to listen, that's really what curiosity is about. But with that, like I said before, curiosity is only part of it, and I think in some spaces that's where we've got stuck, where we've been curious, we've asked questions, we've listened, but then we haven't moved that into anything tangible for people, which is where the frustrations can begin to grow. And again, certainly at Haven, we've been on that journey. We originally started with an I&D board, and that was a place where curiosity thrived, but actually it kept getting stuck, and that's where the frustration built. So, you've been part of our journey in terms of transforming our approach in that space. We've moved from an I&D board to a DE&I team forum, who have now become, and it's taken time for them to, work together and kind of map out what their norm looks like, but they're now a driving force within the business, and that's where capability comes in. So both leaders and team, they need the skills and confidence to drive change, drive an inclusive culture. And again, the I&D board was a great example of that, where we recruited team, but we didn't equip them with the skills, with the capability, with the confidence, to challenge bias, to challenge norms, all really complex areas when we're in this space. If we're talking about an inclusive culture and wanting to create one, often we're having to transform and have difficult conversations. So we didn't really put our team in the best starting point, but we did that with the forum. So we took that learning and from the very beginning, we carved out that time to give them the skills and confidence, and we continued that development. We also then gave them the trust to lead a session. So we hosted our inclusive culture event last November, which Stephen, you co-hosted with me, which was fantastic. And we gave them the floor. They had 80 plus people listening to them about their journey and what they had done, and they're inspiring the next generation across our other communities. So that really shows you, when you combine curiosity with capability, really powerful things can happen. And I think that's really the bedrock of what is the quietest but most powerful behaviors. That curiosity capability mix can be formidable.
Yeah, and I love that bit about curiosity, and I think it goes back to, so we've also about tone and language is really important, and also being genuine. So when people, and where I see people upset others, is when they're very direct, quite blunt, etc. But that curiosity has got to come with sensitivity to actually really understand. And I think you're spot on there. Capability. People want to do a good job and they want to be curious, but sometimes they get blocked in, how do I ask the question without causing offence? How can I be more curious? Those kind of things. But once we unlock it for those leaders, that's where that transformation happens and potential's realised, etc. So I really love that curiosity and capability, because I definitely feel the more we can keep upskilling people, because the landscape does change, then the better people feel more confident. They feel they can be open and safe from a psychological safe place as well. Yeah, fantastic. Really good. So what are some of the most common mistakes well-intentioned organisations make when they're trying to be more inclusive? So what would you say like the common mistakes are when people are trying and they're trying to be more inclusive, but where you see it may not land?
Yeah. Again, a really great question, and a really common one when people are looking to, how did you do it? We won an award as Haven as most inclusive organisation. Again, that doesn't mean we're perfect, but along the way we've made mistakes, right? And we've learnt from them. And I think one of them, and certainly when I joined Haven, was about looking at inclusion as what's everyone else doing? So going onto Google, this was before the days of ChatGPT, and saying, what do we have to do to be more inclusive? What's a great DE&I strategy? And it throws up a bunch of suggestions, and we took them on board and we started doing them. And then 18 months down the line, we realized actually perhaps we didn't start with some of the foundations that would be more meaningful for us. So I think that can often be a common mistake. It's looking outwardly as useful, and I love to do that. I connect often with counterparts at other organizations, but taking that as only part of the puzzle to help. It's actually about understanding your organization. So coming back to that data point, if you have data, utilizing that, or if you don't have it, weaving that in as part of your initial steps, I think is really important. So, we can be well intentioned and go out and try and do loads of things, loads of activities, loads of different initiatives. But if they don't translate into the needs of our people, then often they can land not very well, have a lack of engagement, have team asking, well, why on earth are you doing this over this when we know we've got, a bunch of team who need support here? So for us at Haven, a really great example is using our data to understand our team. And that showed us that a significant proportion of our team have disclosed a neurodiversity, for example. And that's an area that, 2 years ago, we didn't do anything on, like many other organizations. But what it showed us was, as Haven, actually neurodiversity for us is super important, despite it being something widely talked about in wider society, which is great. Actually, for us, it does make sense to focus in on supporting our team, equipping our team with the skills, leadership with the confidence to have conversations. So that's an area where, although we could have, Google would have probably thrown that up as something good for us to focus in on, we can translate that all the way back to why are we doing it at Haven? And I think that's really important, and where the data piece becomes your foundation and fundamental, in addition to listening. I think all organizations in some way or another, ask their teams how they're feeling, whether that be through pulse surveys, engagement surveys. I think that's a really important tool. It's also a really important tool to assess and go, actually, what are we asking? Why are we asking it? And is it driving actions? And that's something we're currently doing at Haven, which is super exciting. So again, constantly evolving is a really important, and often a mistake you can make. You can think, we've got this, and this is our plan for the next 10 years. Actually, your plan has to evolve with the new information that's coming through, because, in the course of 18 months, our business makeup could change fundamentally in terms of who's coming to work here, who's working here, and how people are feeling. So I think being open to evolve along the way is super important. Not feeling like it's, job done once you've ticked off one or two things, and constantly reassessing it, and not being afraid to hold your hands up and go, actually, that didn't quite work as well as we intended. As I've said with the I&D board, whenever we refer back to that, it's not as a criticism. That's a vital part of our story and helping us to get to the position we're in today. Without that, we might not have been able to get to the D&I team forum in the way that we did, because many of those members of the board played a fundamental part in designing and are still part of the forum today. So that's a really great example of kind of learning from those areas where perhaps it didn't quite go to plan, but it's led to an even greater result in the end.
Yeah, and I think that the bit which I really look there about evolving, So it's a constant evolving, looking, shaping, etc. So that's super, super important. And I think also the bit which I really liked, we see a lot of organisation that try best intention, but try to do everything and
Yeah.
nothing gets done. From that point, and that's where colleagues get disappointed, the organisation gets disappointed. So rather than basing it on what the organisation needs, they go on, this looks good. And actually, what I really see the difference with Haven over the good last couple of years of, let's apply what's really important to our colleagues and actually put help. So from a neurodiverse point of view, really put help and support from that perspective, make your colleagues flourish. And it's also the other bit is, which I really enjoy, the IND board you transformed into the DE&I forum, you didn't give up.
Yeah.
Whereas we see with so many organisations, they try, it may not land once, and they go, well, we've tried our best, and they give up. Whereas actually, this is a constant thing you've got to keep working at and to see it evolve. And if people start to come, but over a period of time, it really transforms.
Absolutely.
Yeah, spot on. So how do we move inclusion from being a compliance or HR initiative to something people personally feel and embrace and feel responsible for?
Yeah, I think this is a really important piece because it's very easy for it to sit in the one team, so in the inclusion team, in the D&I
Yes.
team, however it's made up in your organisation, for it to be seen as a HR initiative. That's a very easy trap to fall into. But I think it's when we kind of shift the narrative and showcase actually what you've said is feeding into exactly what is now happening. So again, coming back to that data, that engagement piece, that plays a key part in the areas that we focused in on as a business, but also the key enabler to this and what's really driving it forward for us is the D&I team forum. Without harping on and going back to them too much, which hopefully they'll listen to this and hear the kind of reality of what they're doing, which is fantastic. You know, we designed it so that we would have representation from every corner of the business. And that's where we've changed it from just being a few people over here to actually every corner of the business. Their views are being fed in, but also the work that's happening within the D&I team forum and broader inclusive culture space, because I feed in the broader strategy to them, is now being communicated out into the channels that work best for each department, which we just wouldn't have from that central team perspective. And also, you know, people want to hear from their peers. They don't just want to hear from Lauren and be told what's happening. Actually, they have the opportunity through their representative to feed in, actually, I think this would be really helpful. And again, the neurodiversity piece is something that the forum are now taking the lead on, which is really exciting. So we've done some great foundational work in terms of upskilling our leaders and team, but now the forum are starting to go, actually, for this area, this is what is going to work best and what's going to translate and transform the way that they work. And for this area, this is going to be slightly different. And we can look at that from a park perspective and a support office perspective, but then from that more granular department perspective. So I think it's bringing people along the journey, having those that followership, I think, is really important in this space. And that's what the D&I team forum are really. They're doing this over and above what they do every day, but they're seeing the difference that they're making, and that's important, and that motivates them, you know, to keep going when they've got conflicting priorities. I also think, you know, part of the role within this team is about really being strategic about creating and maintaining strong relationships across the business. It'd be very easy to stay siloed in the people function, in the people team, but actually part of my role is about engaging with other areas of the business and ensuring that they are playing a role within what we're doing. We're currently evolving our policy. So we're reviewing all of our people policies from a D&I lens perspective. And as part of that, we've created focus groups across the business, again, to bring in other leaders and teams into the conversation, that this isn't just being driven centrally from the inclusive culture and people team. We want you to be part of this work because your lived experience, your reality, your experience as a leader and how our policies translate to our teams is really important. So I think it's about looking for those opportunities to bring people into the work, as well as listen to their thoughts on, you know, what work aren't we looking at currently that could be a really important part of what we're doing. And of course, like you say, Stephen, it's very easy to fall into the trap of doing everything and achieving very little. And that's part of my role, right? It's to look back to our strategy, and we have a really strong DE&I strategy, and see how it fits into that plan. And at some point, you know, we adapt the roadmap to focus in on something that perhaps we hadn't considered before, or has just come into play. But equally, there are moments where we have to make that decision to say, actually, we've got to be really focused here, and that doesn't quite sit into the roadmap, at least for the next, you know, 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, and the enjoyable bit here is where you're honest with people. So that actually it doesn't fit now, but we're reviewing kind of shape, etc. And people get the why.
Yeah.
So that context is really, really important from that perspective. I also see, which is really good from your DE&I forum, the broadness of people in there is the representation. Whereas for many years, we've seen only certain populations as in the inclusive culture, was actually what I really like is you've got such a broadness of people's views, etc. So if you put the protected characteristics lens around it, it beautifully fits that you've got all the different views, which I really enjoy, that richness of conversation.
Yeah, and I think that was important, right? And our chair is one of our general managers on our park, who, you know, if we were to talk about barriers to getting involved within D&I and inclusion, you know, our chair is a white, straight male, and you could, you know, on paper, he might sit there and go, actually, I'm not included in this conversation. But for me, it's really important to articulate that inclusion, D&I is about everyone, right? And that's where I think we've gone slightly off-road with people's understanding, because D&I has impacted everyone here at Haven in some way or another, whether it be a policy you've used, whether it be, you know, an activity you've gone to, whether it be some training across different areas that you've attended and upskilled on. You know, D&I plays a foundational role in all of that. And I think people sometimes need that refresher in terms of this isn't for a specific set of people. You don't have to have a certain characteristic. Inclusion is for everyone. That is where we've kind of lost our way a little bit within society, thinking that actually if I don't fit this bucket, it's not for me. Actually, it's for everyone, and everyone will have benefited from inclusion and D&I in some way or another, professionally, personally, within society.
Yeah, and it's that richness of actually the general manager from that background bringing a different perspective, but also learning and listening. So it's fascinating. And I even think of where I've seen with other organisations that people go, we want to recruit a young person. And you go, oh, what characteristics are you looking for? And it's like dynamic, you know, attention to detail, those kind of things. So it's just changing the lens and language of what are we actually looking for to make sure everybody feels included. And what you've got with Haven is you've got a wide range of population, haven't you? And actually where you're getting that richness now and challenge I like as well, it's definitely moving forward, and you can see how well they're doing, which is fantastic. And the other bit is also, I know you've got later on in the year, but celebrating an event to celebrate people's contribution, what they've done. When I was there last year, it blew me away. People were so excited, they want to be there. So it's fantastic, really good work.
And I think, you know, coming back to the event, I think it's also a motivator, right? So one of the key intents was to prepare our communities for the year coming up, but the other was to recognise their incredible work throughout the year. And even on the evening itself, we hosted an awards to recognise, you know, exceptional work. We played some highlights in a video roundup of the year, and I sat on many of the tables, and many of our champions, you know, articulated, I wasn't in that video, our park wasn't there, next year we're going to be part of that, and sometimes we can forget that, everyone needs motivation, and recognition is often a really great way to do that. But, people weren't saying, I want to win the award. They were just saying, I want to be there. I want to be part of that. I want to be part of Haven's legacy and history in this space, whether it be around charity, well-being, culture, DE&I. Those are the four kind of key areas of our different communities. It was just incredible to see, and the impact of that I can see already, from a charity perspective. The fundraising activities our teams are doing has just accelerated this year. We're already way ahead of our fundraising target, which is super exciting. Our wellbeing champions, we're currently going through a complete transformation based on what they shared with us last year and at the event. So I can't downplay actually the impact that coming together and celebrating them has had on the motivation for this year.
Yeah, and especially as organisations, I won't say the person's name, but organisations have moved away from that DE&I because they said it looked good, whereas actually you can tell with Haven it's truly embedded. But as you said, which I really like, kind of your humility, constantly learning, constantly changing. You may not always get everything right, but you're trying your best intent. And that's all we can ever ask of organisations. So the last question, if our listeners could focus on one mindset shift, what would have the biggest impact for them, do you think? So what if they could just focus on one thing? And we talked about listening earlier, etc. But what would you say be one thing they could just take away from today and go and do?
I think, and I really had to think about this, it relates to my previous point around, we've often led the conversation to think about how do we include people, and often that's led us to think actually we need to focus on the protected characteristics. But actually, if we think about how do we design an environment that everyone can thrive in, and that focus on everyone is a really essential part of it. Now, that can make it really broad. The next step to that feeds into my other point around the capability to then take that and go, actually, how do we create a strategy, which I think is important, and then an environment that can in some way or another impact everyone within the business. And it might not be, in every way everyone wants right now, but as long as you can tie that back into why we're doing what we're doing now and what the roadmap looks like, I think that's a really great starting point. So I think it's about moving and not being afraid to move the conversation away from, we might have focused in too much on a particular theme or set of characteristics, to actually, how do we ensure that everyone within the organization feels like this is a place that they can thrive? And that's really why we've evolved, certainly the DE&I team, which was a team of me, into our inclusive culture and well-being team, which ties in those four areas that interconnect so much already, and they were doing so even before we created this team, to actually showcase that none of those four pillars are silos. They're all interconnected, and they all build up to create that inclusive culture, which we're incredibly proud of at Haven. We've got a really strong culture, but again, and you say, it's great to see the humility, but it's just, I think, what you've got to be realistic in, to say that there's going to be points that people lean in and lean out of that, because work is challenging. The reality of having front-facing team with customers, your happiness scale will move significantly throughout the day, but it's all about then having that foundation that people can lean back into and go, actually, this is a really great place to work, and these are the reasons why.
And it's I think it goes back to, which we've talked about a lot about today, that curiosity capability. But one thing which always makes me really feel warm and gooey inside when I come into Haven, and we've been out on parks as well. I got used to hugs, which I had to learn from that, which I no longer go red, and I quite embrace the hug now. But the other thing is, even being out on parks, etc., and Hemel, is just a simple smile. I've definitely, I pulled something back the other day going, why do I like it so much? And actually, when I walk in, people smile and they give you a nod, and you go, oh, I've been noticed. And that's just a nice feeling that I've definitely noticed from a Haven perspective, that you go, actually, it makes me feel good and want to contribute more, etc. That you can't just turn the tap on to make people smile. I've said to people when I have my banking background, can you smile more to customers? They're like, what do I have to? And you're like, oh, whereas actually that natural effect, you can see it blossoming from that point of view.
And,
So,
and I think
Lauren,
that's
oh, sorry.
rooted in, Stephen. At the end of the day, we're a holiday company, right? It's not, we're working in a really fun environment, and we want that to be reflected in our team's experience here. So our values, you know, they're really great. Bring the sunshine is a really great one to encapsulate that. That's what we want our team to feel in their experience at Haven. Dare to Care, Do It With Pride are our two others. You know, we're not working in banking. We're not,
Yes.
you know, doing really serious stuff. We're doing important stuff. We're creating memories for people that are, and without sounding corny and leaning into our tagline, we're making memories that last a lifetime.
Yes.
And that's what we're doing. You know, I bring my daughter on Haven holidays, and these are things she's going to remember, you know, when she's a grown up, and I don't take that for granted. And our team are going to be part of those experiences. You know, our frontline team who are hosting activities for the children, they're part of all these different families' memories, which is an incredible experience. And we want them to feel engaged and part of that, and happy and glad to be here, which an inclusive culture is really the bedrock of that.
Yeah, no, spot on, absolutely spot on. So, Lauren, this has been brilliant today. So I just want to say a huge thank you for giving up your time to come on to our Inspiring Thoughts podcast. How can people reach out or connect with you, Lauren? What's the best way for people to reach out or connect with you?
I am on LinkedIn. I'm notoriously difficult to find because I've got a very unique surname.
Yes, you have a wonderful surname, haven't you? Yeah.
So I'm just down as Lauren D, Head of Inclusive Culture at Haven. So if you do want to find me, more than happy to connect on LinkedIn, and also give Haven a follow if you're interested in anything that I've said. We post updates on there, not everything, but just key highlights of what we're doing along the way. It's a great way to keep up with us on LinkedIn, and our Instagram page, Facebook, and of course, come on holiday with us. It's a great place to be.
Yeah, love that plug at the end, Lauren. That's beautiful, isn't it? Yeah,
I'm going to tell my commercial team.
Yeah, you're going to say to them later.
I need a code.
Yeah.
Enter the code Lauren Holidays, and then I might get a commission for it.
Yeah, definitely a good idea for the commercial team. I like that. So, Lauren, this has been brilliant today. I really, really appreciate it, and also how you brought inclusive culture back to actually how it works in the workplace to be successful. And we can see with Haven, winning awards is a great thing, but actually the feeling is a different thing, and actually what you're creating is really, really, really good. So, thank you so much for joining today. Enjoy the rest of your day. But thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks, Stephen.